administration came to power in Taiwan, there was the party struggles among the political parties in Taiwan, and those that are closer to the mainland are likely to be further punished and suspected against. And there's also the recent Congress decision in the United States, at least in the Senate, about the Taiwan certain kinds of specific legislations, which is still in the process. That's why it seems that this side of the world, particularly here in China, things related to it can become very sensitive. Mr. Zhong, help us understand better.
As for cross-strait relations in the past year, the official dialogue has been suspended just because Taiwan authority refused the 1992 consensus. But the people-to-people contact, I mean the unofficial communication has been increasing. For the example, in the past year, the cross-strait economic ties has been increasing by about 14%. So from this, you could find that the cross-strait people-to-people contact has been warming, although the official dialogue has been cooling. As for the Taiwan Travel Act in United States, I think it is hurting our people's feeling, and it is damaging the One China policy, which is written in 3 Sino and U.S. joint communiques.
All right.
So I think the United States should restrain itself and respect our national interest.
Absolutely. Mr. Zhong, while you were talking, I was trying to note down some of the terminologies. For example, 1992 consensus. For those who have not studied this side of the politics well, they probably wouldn't know. And also the 3 joint communiques between China and the United States. How much is it talking about Taiwan? To what extent? About what content is it relating to Taiwan? Probably for those who are not in the field may not know necessarily. And also the people-to-people relations you specifically talk about without giving specific examples. What I'm trying to say is that when we have cross-cultural communications, we all need to be very aware, including myself, about what has been said clearly and what are being taken granted, whether that is correct or not. So in this case, when these companies, Mr. Zhong has already advised carefully, when these companies are aware of their mistakes, they should correct it. If they don't, that is a mistake of a very totally different nature, right?
Oh, no, absolutely. And I mean, everyone wants their sovereign borders recognized. And this is the whole thing with Mr. Trump right now. I mean, he's saying, let's enforce the laws, let's talk about our country. And the same thing is
I'm not
true
sure that
China.
Should be compared to what is going on here in China about this case.
It's not dissimilar. I mean, in as much as saying, one must follow what is the law of the land of the People's Republic of China, which is saying that this is an inseparable part. That's Taiwan. That Macau and Hong Kong are inseparable. So that's.
Here comes the thing. It is not just the issue about whether people respect the sovereignty of China. It has also become an issue when it's being portrayed internationally about China's relations with multinationals these days. We have heard different versions of stories about what China's attitude toward foreign investors these days compared to maybe 20 years ago, and the other way around, how international investors as a result interact with China, and then how Chinese are looking at these attitudes coming from international investors and react even more. So this seems to be a cycle that we're talking about here. The question is, how can we see the common ground of both sides? Let's just say international investors and also China's own economic and trade development. Professor, probably you have a say here because you're teaching these courses every day.
Yeah, it's we always say it's a better engagement of all stakeholders, either it's the government or business partners and consumers together. So China has always been very much resolved and actually consistent to welcome global companies in China. And right now, particularly during the past 15 years after China joined the WTO, we are trying to create a better leveling field where we can converge the tax system, the all type of treatment that is similar to the Chinese companies. So of course.
So let me ask you directly, since that is a question being asked in, let's just say, international media stories. they say, does China still need international investors?
Absolutely.
Is China going to welcome international investors as much as it did before?
Absolutely. I think China is not offering the, say, supranational treatment, that which is true, but China is creating a better infrastructure and better environment for global companies, and the entire going abroad process actually is able to better combine with investing in China, the inflow and outflow, so that really can really serve the Chinese double strategy in global integrities.
Mr. Zhong, I want to go to you as well. As you may have noticed, the Chinese consumers these days are made of ever younger generations. They are the main labor force when it comes to consumption. They grew up in a very different environment, usually after the reform and opening up. What they see is China always on the rise. And also what they see is the foreign businesses are doing extremely well and harvesting in China. How do you see the reality now, and how should we make sure both the foreign investors, international investors, as well as China's own constituencies, understand the history and also understand the important common grounds both sides really have with one another?
Yes, as for Chinese consumers, especially for those young consumers, they fully understand that those foreign investments has directly helped or boosted Chinese economy. So they highly appreciate those efforts from those foreign companies. Still, for those young generations, they become much more pride or become much more aware of the national interest, I think, than the other generations. So I think they should ask those foreign companies to be much more aware of the China national interest. They should respect China national interest, should abide Chinese mainland's laws and regulations, and should also do some self-check or self-examination on the Taiwan issue or Hong Kong issue or something like that. So I mean, in one word, I think for China, especially for those young generation, they welcome those investment from other foreign countries because they would provide more job opportunities for. But still, those foreign companies should abide by Chinese regulations and laws.
And before we go, Mr. Lehman, you want to have final words?
Yeah, I do. You know, I mean, the question is, what is an international company any longer? So, like Foshan, for example, owns Cirque du Soleil. I mean, by way of example, I mean, Alibaba is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. JD.com is as well. Okay.
So, what is your point?
My point is that it's a constantly moving target about international businesses and who owns them and who doesn't. Waldorf Astoria, bought by the Chinese. So, you know, I wouldn't necessarily penalize. There is some bad actors in this. I think it's up to the government to educate people how it should be written, and then businesses can abide. And then businesses, I think, want to because they want to make money. They don't want to offend anybody.
Very interesting discussion. Well, we have to wrap it up over here. I hope those cases will not be repeatedly discussed and the same mistakes will not be made. Thank you so much, the three of you gentlemen, helping us understand better about this, quote, sensitive issue. Professor Liu Baocheng, Mr. Zhong Houtao, and Mr. Edward Lehman. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.